Today, Ian and Jessi are on the Project Ranger big time. Frame rails, drivetrain, and the interior all come together. Plus, see how the modifieds tear up the rock crawling trails with some down-home ingenuity. Xtreme starts now.
Welcome to Xtreme 4x4 and another phase in our Project Ranger Resurrection.
If you remember, we began with that hulk of a truck that we pulled out of a junkyard and began to build a Baja-themed off-road bandit. After we stripped off what we did not need, we began to rebuild the truck, starting with the cab. We added extended cab panels to give us a location for the rear-mounted radiator, as well as stretch out the wheelbase.
Then we gutted the interior and fabbed up a custom roll cage inside the truck.
Now it's time for us to start dealing with the parts on the outside of the cab. A lot of people have been asking us as to why did we leave this part of the C-channel frame underneath the cab?
And we left it there for a lot of reasons. You have easy access to the body mounts to line them up. You can secure the body to the frame bench a lot easier. But most importantly, we chose to do a 2x6 ladder frame underneath this cab. And it's just going to tie into that C-channel really nice.
And then we're going to go ahead and take our roll cage and tie it into the new frame, giving it the triangulation strength that it needs. Then we can start dealing with our engine mounts and our transmission mounts. And
we'll have to measure for some axles. We've got some more interior stuff to work on. So we got a lot to do.
We better start getting to work.
Good idea. All right, we've got all of our frame pieces cut and they're just mocked into place for now. But before we can start welding things in like this cross member, we got to run a centerline line down the entire frame jig.
Now normally when you're using a frame bench, you don't have to use the string method to find center. But in our case, our cross member numbers have fallen off. So this just goes to show you that you don't have to have a frame bench to build a chassis. You can use any bench as long as it's level and it's sturdy.
Once the center line is established, we can take a plumb bob like this and hang it off the center marking on a cross member to determine if the truck is actually square in the jig. You need the truck square in the jig, so when you measure off that cross member to the outer points of the frame, you will know that that frame is actually square. If your frame is out of square, the truck will look like a banana on 4 wheels driving down the road. All right, it looks like back here it's almost bang on.
I think we're a little bit off up here.
How much is a little bit off?
I would say about 2 or 3 inches.
I would say that's a lot.
I think we're gonna have to do some ratcheting.
Okay.
You're almost there. You got, oh, stop. With the truck straight on the jig, we can go ahead and tie in our new frame sides with the new cross member.
When it comes to our transmission, we really wanted bulletproof. So we called the guys at Rockland Standard Gear and had them put together an NV4500 5-speed trans. Now the new Venture 4500 is an awesome off-road trans. It's a helical gear set that's constant meshed and it's fully synchronized. And this one is synchronized even in reverse. And what that means is when you're going from first to reverse with a little bit of engine speed and wheel spin, it'll slide right in. Now you can still find the NV4500 in boneyards. They came in the 90s, GM and Dodge 1-ton trucks. The earliest versions had a 6.3 to 1 gear ratio, which is great for a crawler. But because this thing ain't no crawler, we opted for the 5.6 first gear. We're gonna mate it to the engine with one of these Lakewood scatter shields because this thing is indestructible.
Now I know that the Ranger is gonna look like a pre-runner truck, but you gotta remember, it's 4-wheel drive. So we're gonna put in this NP271 transfer case. We plan on taking that truck on some serious terrain and don't wanna run across any problems along the way. Now this too is from Rockland Standard Gear, where they've been building hardcore standard transmissions and transfer cases for over 20 years. And the best part is that they don't sell just complete units. If you need only a few components, those are the guys to call.
So we got a Ford engine, a Dodge transmission, and a Ford transfer case, and that's a lot of different parts. So to help put them all together, we got this adapter plate from Advanced Adapters to go in between the bell housing and the body of that NV4500. And we're going to mock everything into place using this plastic engine block we got from Pi Air. And the nice thing is it's drilled and tapped just like the original block. So if you mock this thing into place, you know the real engine is sure to fit.
Plus, it's going to help speed up your fabrication process because you're not dealing with the weight of the actual engine. So if you don't have your block, it's okay because these things come in big blocks, small blocks, and your favorite combos. They're all there.
Check back after the break. We got more fabrication to do on the range.
Up next, see how off-road technology helps conquer Mother Nature. Hardcore rock crawling when Xtreme 4x4 continues.
Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4 and part of the shop you never get to see, and that's the office, because we spend most of our time out in the shop building the trucks.
But when we are in here, we're ordering parts and we're talking to people like you on our message boards, answering questions to Ditch Doctor 21 and Huppy and Huge F350.
And one thing you guys keep asking for is more rock crawling, so we're heading back to Jellicoe, Tennessee for some hardcore action. Restricted to OEM frames, stock steering, and 37-inch tires, the modifieds still tear it up at rock crawling competitions.
Go big or go home.
The modified class is really where it's at. It was built to allow the extreme off-roader to move into rock crawling without the big budget, high-dollar rig.
The defending UROC Xtreme East champ knows he's not going to run his Land Cruiser stock against these rocks.
My particular vehicle, we've done some extensive modifications. It's got a full coil overs and 4-link suspension. All my suspension is 70-75 aluminum links with the coil overs, and you know, it flexes a lot. It flexes so much we use limiting straps to keep it from falling out from under the vehicle. But you can see from where we're parked, you know, to get past something like this, should there have been a cone sitting right there, you've got to have that articulation. Otherwise, you're carrying a tire in the air, and your vehicle is even far more unbalanced.
It takes more than good articulation to get through these courses.
Well, the thing that really makes the vehicle go is the locking differentials, because that's what makes all 4 wheels turn at the same time. This is the Atlas transfer case shifters, one for the front, one for the rear, so you can shift them independently. And the value of the independent shifting is you can unlock the front or the rear. So I can actually put the vehicle in front wheel drive only, the rear in neutral, and using this cutting brake, lock the rear brakes and do a front dig by turning the wheels in front wheel drive only, and the vehicle will pivot on the back axle. Instead of a curve, it tracks right across. And you probably see some of that out here on the courses when people made really tight turns. They've relied on their cutting brake.
What his machine conquers even impresses Mike.
Things, when you look at it, you just don't think you'll go, and bang, they do it.
Everybody has their own ideas as to what works out here, and a variety of engineered rigs makes it interesting for the fans.
Every rig out here is different, and that's what's so awesome about this sport is there's not a single rig that's the same. So it makes for a wide variety of action to watch because every rig reacts differently, every driver drives differently, and it's just so fun.
To get through this rocky East Coast terrain, Josh modified the wheelbase on his 1988 Wrangler.
The wheelbase is a very important issue, especially now that they're having us do a whole lot of hill climbs and stuff. So, like I'm running a 101-inch wheelbase. A stock wheelbase Jeep is typically 93 inches or thereabouts, and by extending the wheelbase, it helps us climb better. It makes the rig more stable. But also, when you lengthen the wheelbase, it causes your center of gravity to be less because the further distance between the wheels, the greater chance of a rock hitting your skid plate. So everybody, you tuck your skid plate up as high as you can to keep all your transmission and transfer case and stuff out of the way. And that's the key, is to make the bottom of the rig as flat as possible, because you're going to scrape, you're going to rub, you're going to do body damage, and you just got to realize that and try to build a rig in such a way that it has nothing to hang up on. You know, you don't want a sharp corner for a rock to catch on, and you just stick there.
They may have different philosophies on setup, but it's all about getting to the top.
It is the ultimate in fun. There is nothing I've found that gets me this excited without physically beating me down.
And the rocks are huge, you know, you're climbing over rocks half the size of your vehicle, and that's really hard. It's hard on the vehicles, it's hard on the driver to say, I don't know if I can do this, and you actually have to step up and make it happen.
Got an idea for the show? Drop us a line at Xtreme4x4TV.com.
Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4 in Project Ranger Resurrection. We just finished putting in our ladder frame, and now it's time for us to determine where the engine, transmission, and transfer case is going to go. I'm going to start by pulling off this floor plate so I can get an idea of where the shifter is going to be.
Then I'm going to drop this engine in between the frame rails. Now, we want the motor to sit as far back in the frame as possible for weight transfer. So once we have this one where we want it, we can start building some motor mounts.
We got our engine mounts made, and how we're going to mount it to the frame is that we will eventually put a urethane bushing through this tubing, put it on this little prop here, and weld it all to the frame. But we can't quite do that yet because we're not quite sure that this is the exact place we're going to keep the engine. So for now, I'm just going to tack weld these mounts onto the frame so it's not moving around during our mock-up stage.
With the engine mounts mocked up, we can get started on the roll cage up front. Okay, these tubes are going to be the start of our engine roll cage. Now when we put the real engine in place, we'll be running 2 more tubes across the top of it and then back through the firewall to tie into the passenger cage. Now that'll make the whole front end of the truck super strong. The downfall is when we pull the motor, it'll have to come through the bottom.
And by adding these tubes here, we're giving the truck extra strength through triangulation. Now what we mean by triangulation is that a square has 4 weak points, and when you cut it in half and give it its diagonals, it's bracing it so it doesn't actually twist.
Now with the engine in place, the next step will be the transmission. After it's bolted to the adapter plate, I'll weld a brace under the lower mount to temporarily support it.
All right, well, the transmission is temporarily in place and we want to start building our permanent mounts. But before we do that, we got to get this shifter in place. But I think we're going to have the seats in here first.
And for those seats, we went to Mastercraft for a set of Sportsman suspension seats. Now, those of you guys building hardcore off-road rigs know the benefits of a suspension seat, but if you've never seen one before, check it out. You've got a welded steel frame that the webbing and the fabric is slung in between, and that's going to absorb a lot of the shock when you're off-road. These ones come with an adjustable lumbar support for comfort, and they're ready to accept a 5-point harness. Now, for a 5-point harness, we went back to Mastercraft and got their full race version with the quick disconnect, just in case it's needed. But the coolest thing we got from them, window nets. Here you go. Nice and light, huh? Try that. Sit on that.
Let's grab the shifter too. Oh yeah, that's a heck of a lot better. I think we're gonna have to change the shift, but
It's a little tall, isn't it? It's big rig trucker style. Enough fun and games. With the seat height set, we can build and install the mounts. We used 1x1 square tubing for a flat mounting surface. Okay, we have our seat mounts built into our roll cage, and if you remember when we were designing this cage, this was one of those considerations. You want your seats mounted to the cage, so if you roll the truck over, they don't just tear out of the floor.
another item that you're going to want to mount securely to the roll cage are the seat belts. Now this 5-point harness came with specific instructions on how to mount them. So we're going to begin with the lap belts and these tabs that we made ourselves. Place the seat belt in between the two tabs, put the bolt through, and weld it onto the roll cage. Now it states that we need to do this 2.5 inches forward from the seat back.
And before we lay out any more of those seatbelt tabs, we're going to put the seat in place. We want to make sure the shoulder belts are between 1 and 4 inches below the slot in the backrest. So we're going to check that this bar we welded in before is in the right spot. Once we're sure of that, we can start working on a submarine belt. Thanks. Some people refer to this as a crotch strap, and it's an important part in a 5-point harness, especially in an off-road truck. When this thing flips upside down, your body's going to want to slip out from underneath the seat belt. The submarine belt or crotch strap is what's going to hold you in place.
For more information on anything you've seen today, check us out online, Xtreme4x4TV.com.
Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4. We've been working pretty hard on this Ranger Resurrection. We got our engine mounts mocked up in place, we pulled the transmission in, we had to figure out where our shifter was going to go, and we mounted our seats. Now it's time for us to get back to building.
And the first thing we're going to build, or rebuild in this case, are the motor mounts. When we mocked these into place, we built them extra tall, and now that the transmission is on its mounts, this thing isn't level anymore.
With the transmission up on its temporary bracing, we can go ahead and start planning out the new cross member. Now the original cross member mounted in these 4 holes, which is going to be to our advantage. So I went ahead and made these plates out of 1/8-inch steel. I'll drill them for the mounting holes. Then I will use a hole saw to cut 2 holes for the cross member tubes. Then I will mock everything into place. And I'll weld it solid.
I finished rebuilding this motor mount. You can see I moved the tube into the mount itself, and we're still going to mount it onto the side of the block with urethane bushings to support it, but I'll use ears off the side of the frame. We had to do this because we had the mounts on top of the frame before, and now the motor's sitting a little bit lower. Now, this is going to happen whenever you're mocking something up. You're going to find problems, and you're going to have to rebuild stuff. But I've seen guys defend the wrong decision for about the same amount of time as it would have been to rebuild it right.
All right, the transmission cross member is done. It'll look like it'll fit over there, right?
Yep.
Okay, so it should fit, but we can't get it in just yet because the frame bench is in the way. So until we can get this piece out of the way, we're just gonna stick with our temporary bracing.
Last thing we're going to do today is take the doors off and clean out the guts.
Yeah, who needs windows when we're gonna weld the door shut anyway? We'll skin them with aluminum panels because they're lightweight. And the welded doors will help strengthen the cab body.
Finally, these window nets will round out the race theme of our resurrected Ranger.
I still can't believe you wanted to end our hardcore fabrication show with window nets.
Well, they're racy, and they also didn't require multitudes of bending and cutting and fitting and notching. It was nice to have a break.
Well, next time you see the Ranger, we will be doing more bending and cutting and notching and fitting. Hopefully we'll have some fiberglass panels and...
We'll be measuring for the axles, and we're going to decide on the suspension, and we still don't know whether that's going to be radius arm, 4-link, 3-link, 2-link, maybe even a 1-link. Never heard of that before.
Window nets, 1-link. How is this going to come into?